to our Basic Reporting P+ webinar, and we're happy to have you here today. So just a little bit about us at Demonstrated Success. I know that a lot of you sort of know who we are because you have a membership to Performance Plus, but just a little bit about what we're doing. We have lots of coaches. We have decades of educational experience. We were going to say hundreds of years, but we kind of went back and forth on that. But anyway, we do a lot with ELA and math curriculum and instructional and assessment support. We do a lot with culture and climate and PLC training, a lot of data-informed instruction, and we've been doing a lot of remote learning support, specifically since we've gone remote and hybrid, and we've worked with over 30,000 educators, and here are some of our sites. All right, so today, Karen Matzo is going to be your presenter. I am the facilitator. We're going to ask if you do have questions, if you go ahead and put them in the question and answer portion, that would be really helpful. This is the second webinar in our Performance Plus subscriber series. I think it might even be the third at this point. We had the P+ student page, and then we had how to put in your frameworks, and then this is our first reporting one. So we're happy to have you here today. We know that you are busy and you have a lot going on, so we appreciate that. We also know that these times in education are hard. So anything that we can do to help you with your data and anything in P+, please let us know. We're here to support you. So you're muted. You can go about your business. We're not going to hear anything that you're saying. But again, if you put your questions in the Q&A portion, that's what I'll be monitoring. If you have something for everybody, you can put it in the chat, but we tend to use Q&A. So I will pass this over to Karen and she will begin.
Hello all, how are you? Here are today's goals. We're going to review some reports in Performance Plus that you can create. And we're going to help you try to develop an understanding of when to use which reports. So I hope that you can walk away with those two goals fulfilled. So we'll talk in general about Performance Plus reporting. You can see here, one from the left is the reporting icon. And when you hover on the icons in Performance Plus, they become labeled, which is nice so that you know. But this one's pretty easy to remember because it's a graph. So when you want to go ahead and create reports, this is what this is going to look like after you click on that graph. And you have over there on the left-hand side, report 1, right? So you're going to choose a report framework. You use the filters to decide what information you want in the report. And then there are some other options that you can use to tailor your report in different ways. Down here, okay, so those steps are outlined 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, and then down here we have, you can see you have My Reports where you can save reports and keep them there, okay, but also any pre-created reports around the New Hampshire SAS data that are pushed to you. So sometimes we meaning the state and Demonstrated Success, we push reports to you from the state assessment, and so those will be down there. When you go to create a report and you click on the reports icon, okay, you will get two options. One of those options is Performance Tracker, and one of those options is Assessment Builder. You will use Performance Tracker much more than Assessment Builder options because the Assessment Builder report options all have to do with situations where you have specific items, okay, that you are looking at data for. Most of the data that's put into Performance Plus lives, or you can generate reports through Performance Tracker because most of it revolves around general categories, rubric use. Okay, so for example, like the SAS, you can't get item reports in the SAS, right? You can get standard reports, you can get cluster reports, but you're not looking at the individual items as much. So that, you're not going to look at the assessment builder reports for that. You're going to look at the performance tracker reports. Or the same with like NWEA. NWEA doesn't report along items, right? It reports along clusters or categories. And the same thing if you were to put in a local assessment, let's say it was a writing assessment and you created a framework in here for the rubric. And again, you would look at the data in the performance tracker reports. On the other side of the coin, if you were to have an assessment in here, like a local math assessment, where you wanted, you created it in a way that you could do item analysis, right? Then you would be using the assessment builder reports. So I sort of wanted to show you some of the favorite reports that I use here in Performance Tracker, right? So the proficiency pie chart is an old favorite. It's a pie chart, easy to read, okay? I wind up using comparative reports, achievement levels a lot, the assessment scores report, and any two scatter plot, and I will show you these as we go. And Heather, just interrupt me with questions.
Yep, nothing so far.
Okay. And now these are some of the assessment builder reports that I'm going to show you later that I also use, the item analysis and by question and the item analysis by student. So those are going to be some of your favorites. Before we go into looking at the individual reports, I'm going to show you individual student reports. So the other icon that you're going to use a lot, so you remember the second one in from the left is the reporting icon. And then the one where you have the 3 kids, that's your student icon. So that's what you're going to click on to get to what we call the student detail page and individual student reports. When you click on those 3 kids, you will get this. You will get a student search. And what you're going to do is you're going to use the drop downs to bring up a list of kids from which to choose. Now, from years and years and years of using PerformancePLUS, I will tell you that it's better to use fewer drop downs and criteria than more. So if you want to bring up a kid's name, and you go in and you put in their first name and their last name and you're not coming up with anything, what I would do is I would just put in their grade level and the building and get a list. Or you can also put in the first letter of the last name with an capitalized with an asterisk, and then you'll get all kids with that's whose last name starts with that letter. Okay, so play around with these drop downs every so often, and this has happened to me so many times. I'm looking for a specific student and I've put the name in and I've spelled it wrong, or for some reason it's not recognizing it, but it's in there. And if I use a different around the back approach, then I will get that student in a list. So once you put those variables in, you will generate a list, and here is a list of students. And again, everything's de-identified, which is why we're actually not going live. And you'll get this list. Here we go. John Smith, John Smith, John Smith. Those are live links. When they are blue with an underline, they are live links. And if you click them, you come to a student detail page on one of the students. So every student detail page has the following. We don't generally have most schools have not put in student photos, okay, but a couple have. So there's, name, the school organization, the grade level, all of this demographic information up there. Every student has a performance tracker ID, and so that's how data goes in about that student from the state. If you look to the right-hand side, it says student ILP, and I'm not going to go into that today, but for schools that have paid for the ILP, which stands for Individual Learning Plan, it's a little bit extra on top of the basic Performance Plus price. There is an individual plan that can be created and copied and regenerated each year and approved upon and changed for the immediate needs of that student. So it's a really cool tool to do some personalized planning and goal setting for kids. So underneath there, the first section on the student detail page is the assessments section. Let me just make sure that I didn't skip anything. Yep. So you go to the assessments section, and you can see at the top, there are those different tabs. So right now, on this student detail page, all the information from all of those years is showing. But if it becomes overwhelming, like if you're dealing with a kid that's in 8th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, and there's too much information, excuse me, and you're looking for specific information from specific years, go ahead and just choose one of the tabs and it'll just show the information from that year.
And just a quick question. When you say it shows the information, this is any of the reports that were pushed to people, and then anything if you had a framework in here and you put data into the framework, it will show up, correct?
Yep, any assessment data that's in there, yes. Yep. Thanks. So you can see here, you will have intuited by now that this section will accrue all of this student's assessments over the years. So this particular student has taken STAR with skills for a couple of years through first, second, and third grade. When you move to the right, you can see the student's scale score. And then under proficiency level, you see those very happy blue boxes. And they are happy blue boxes because that is a level 4. Okay, so the blue boxes are above proficient, right, in whatever scale you've developed or whatever scale exists in Performance Plus for that particular assessment. Okay, so in this situation, the STAR is put in and it's reported by quartiles. So this particular student fell into the 4th quartile, okay, for those assessments. But then in 2018, you can see here that the reporting was slightly different, and now it's a proficient with distinction. So that just can change around, but you know that that student is performing above competent or above proficient. If we keep going down to the SAS, you see in April 2019, you can see this student's SAS scores. And interestingly, on the SAS, when she or he got there, his or her ELA scores, I think this was a female, but anyway, her ELA scores are lower compared to the STAR scores. So that's an interesting thing and a good thing to know, right? And so it's interesting. So you can use Performance Plus to look at correlations between your national assessments and your state assessments to see whether the student's performance on the national assessment will predict the parallel performance on the state assessment. And in this case, that did not happen. And to be frank, oftentimes that doesn't happen, right? And you can see if you're looking at the SAS, which is highlighted in yellow, level 2 approaching proficient is the color yellow, and then level 3 proficient is the color green. Red is below. I do want to point out in the upper right corner, do you see the little blue boxes and the checks? It says local, state, national, classroom, and high stakes. Right now, any assessment data that that student has in their account is reflected on this page. But again, if it was too much and overwhelming, you could uncheck those and check just one. Like if you only wanted to look at the national assessment scores, or you only wanted to look at the local or the state, you could do that. Okay, as we work our way down, I want you to envision that the chunks that we're looking at on these slides are one long report, and you scroll down to these separate sections. So the section underneath the assessment section is classes, and that's where a student's classes from all the years they've been where they've been in New Hampshire are listed with the teacher names. And we blocked out the teacher names, right? You know, identify. We don't want to start identifying teachers on our webinars. So you can see that. And that's kind of cool because, you know, let's say that this student then went on to 5th grade and he or she was in the middle school. You can go back as the English teacher, right? And ask, you can call up the teachers in your district or email them to consult around the historical performance of a student that you may have who's sitting in front of you. Okay, student groups. Underneath the classrooms, we can see the class section rather. We can see student groups, and this is very useful section. I want you to pay attention to where it says active and inactive. Now, obviously, you're noticing that the dates on this particular webinar are outdated, right? And because this is from the test site, and these are still shots, when you go into Performance Plus, your most recent, the active school year will be 2021. And under active, it will show you all of the active groups that that student is in. For example, and you can't see it here because this student doesn't have a lot of active groups, but if a student had an IEP, then it would say IEP under active. If a student had Title I, and that information was reported to the state, then that would be active. If the student was suspended, okay, that would show under active. So your most recent active information is at the top, and then underneath there, it will give you the historical groups that a student was a part of, which is really very helpful because, again, if a student gets to middle school and we had no idea that he was just taken out of special education the previous year, right? Let's say we had no record of that. Then we can't give him the support or keep an eye on him the way we might, So it's very good. Or if a student had a history, you have a kid sitting in front of you and you're kind of like, oh, I'm a little mystified by why this student is not performing better. He or she seems to be really strong in some areas and a confident learner, and yet there are some big gaps. You could go on here and see, that student was absent 15 days last year and 25 days the previous year. And so then you realize that the reason for that student's gaps, right, is that he or she was not in school. So speaking to some of the other groups on this particular slide, the absences are cumulative absences, and they are entered at the end of the year. Okay, so it's not updated, on an ongoing monthly or basis. Special education is updated twice during the year, at the beginning and then towards the mid-end. So that also, if you have a student that you've identified and they don't come up in Performance Plus as being in the IEP group or having an IEP, it may be because it's not in here yet. When you go down to where it says number of schools attended, your options there are 1 school, 2 schools, or 2+ schools. So that's another thing that's interesting to see. If you see that in the past, the student for a couple of years attended more than 2 schools in a given year, right? That might be a reason for some gaps in that student's learning. So you want to keep an eye out for that. And where it says town underneath, it's the sending town, right? So again, this has been de-identified, but in this particular case, a student's sending town would be listed there. Okay, underneath the student groups, when we start at the top, where you see interventions, there is an interventions module in Performance Plus where you can track interventions, and that comes with it. It's not extra, but any interventions that the student that were input for the student would be listed there, and the progress monitoring would show there. Then there's notes, and that's just notes. And the thing to remember there is that this is a long-term data warehouse, right? So that whatever we put in Performance Plus stays there unless we take it out. So when we're putting in notes, and I sometimes I have to smile, because a kid, this may be with a student from, grade 1 all the way till grade 12. So if the student is, having accidents in the classroom in kindergarten or grade 1, and that becomes, and you put that in a note, then the kid's in 12th grade, and that's some teacher somewhere is still seeing that. So we want to make sure that we are careful with what we write down in Performance Plus and keep it very professional and sort of high level. Okay. School building history. That just lists the school buildings that a student has been in. And again, it's blocked out here because of identity, to de-identify. But you can see here if a student has went to one school building in Manchester, like if the kid bumped around between 5 or 6 different schools, it'll be listed there. And underneath it says district history, same, right? If a student went from Hanover to Manchester to Claremont, it will all be listed there. Any questions? We're good?
We're good.
Okie dokie. So there is a report for individual students called the Student Assessment Summary that I'm going to show you. And this is just an example of how you can print out and use this as a PDF. It's a great thing to share with parents, or a great thing for case managers and for student support meetings. Here is the student's assessment history, a report that shows this student's assessment history so that you can compare. If you look up in the upper right corner, there is a little black diamond for the student score and a clear diamond for the state average score. So if you look at the SBAC in that first column, right, this particular student exceeded the state average on the overall math scale score in SBAC in grade 4. If we keep moving down, notice that the next assessment is a local assessment. And yet there is still a see-through diamond that theoretically indicates the state average score, but that is not the state average score because this assessment was not given to the state. This is a local assessment around 4th grade fact fluency that was given just in this building to this particular grade level. And that comparison, or maybe it was given to all of the 4th grade in the whole district, okay? But that is the comparison that's being made, not to the state.
Okay, so the comparison tends to be then to compare whatever the population that took it was. So
the whole population, yes.
Makes sense.
Okay. And this is just another example. You can see the SBAC, the fact fluency. You can see that this student for SBAC was very close to the state average. And then this student is performing, and it's kind of interesting if you look, so we have subtraction and addition, right? This student is exceeding. And then when we move into multiplication and division fact fluency in grade 4, right, we see that this student is needs some work. He's not proficient yet, and considerably behind the other, behind his peers in this particular assessment. And then when we go on to, I think that would be everyday math, the EM4, that this student is, it's so interesting. I can't help but want to look. At the end of the year in 4th grade, this student had a bad day. So, I mean, there's quite a bunch of variation. Okay. So that was sort of the individual student reporting. And for those of you that are out there and you're just beginning in Performance Plus, I would really encourage you to spend some time in the student report. So go to that student's icon, which is the 3 kids, and bring up a student detail page. and sort of work through that and explore that first before you do anything else. And it'll give you a really good idea of the information that's in Performance Plus before you go any further. Okie doke. So now we have performance tracker reports. Remember, I told you at the beginning that there's two types of reports. There's performance tracker and assessment builder. And you're going to use the performance tracker reports more because the performance tracker reports do not depend on having availability of specific items. So in performance tracker, the very simplest report that I would encourage you to do first, without a doubt, is the pie chart. I love the pie chart. It's friendly to everybody. Everybody likes a good pie chart. It'll give you a chart that shows you the percentages in each level of proficiency, and it can show you multiple assessments in different charts and sections, okay, at once. So I'm gonna take you here. So here is a pie chart, and you can see the level 4, there's 21 students in level 4, so there's an accompanying chart to the right, and then the pie graph to the left. You have your 21 students in level 4. You have 16 in level 3, that's proficient. Remember, level 4 is exceeding proficiency. Level 2 is below proficiency, and level 1 is at a beginning stage. It's the lowest performing level of any, reporting. I want you to know that if you click on any of these, you will get a student list. So if you click on the 21, you'll get a list of the kids that are in that group. And if you click over here on the 29, on the 49, you'll get a list of the kids that took the assessment, okay, and their scores. Here we have another. This is a overall ELA scaled score for grade 4. And for grade 5. So there are some reports in here that are standards reports and some that are achievement. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the standards reports. The standards reports have a lot of potential, but they're only useful if the assessment that you've put in is aligned to standards, right? If your assessment isn't set up in a way on the framework where it's aligned to standards, your standards reports are not going to come out in a useful way. So let's look at I'm going to go back one. Well, we'll keep going, and I'll talk more about these. The assessment sections is a great report because it allows you on a given assessment to look at within that assessment. If I administered that assessment to 30 kids in my class, or let's say it was 200 kids in the 5th grade, I can then generate this report, and I can see across the 5th grade or in my class, right, which sections of the test the students did the best in, which they did the worst in, where the greatest number of misunderstandings were. You have to make sure that when you set up your sections, that if you're doing a local assessment, that you've set them up in a meaningful way that will give you information. In other words, you want to group in one section all of your key ideas and details, right? So that and all of your author's craft, or all of your vocabulary understanding, or for math, you want to group all of your fractions work around fractions, and then all of your algebra work. And if I'm misspeaking, Heather, let me know, so that you can get a good idea of, within those sections, it's consistent. The content is consistent so that it means something. So here's a assessment sections bar chart. And you can see here that students did the very best in geometry, right? They excelled in geometry. They were competent in numbers and operations. in the different sections of numbers and operations, measurement and data, and that their lowest area was operations and algebraic thinking. So that's good to know. Here's another one with fact fluency, right? It seems like the division fact fluency may have been the weakest area for this group. So we want to go back to that. And here's another one for science. You can see the inquiry is suffering, and science, that their overall scale score was the strongest section. So another report is the assessment scores report. And I love the assessment scores report. It sort of looks like a spreadsheet. And you can look at, on the left-hand side, the students will be listed, and across the top, the assessments and their sections will be listed, and the data will be there. So it's really good for tracking. It's really good for comparing performance on multiple assessments. You can use the assessment scores and sort it to make groups, intervention groups, or rotational instructional groups within your classroom. Let's see. I'll show it to you. So here's an assessment scores report. Blocked out on the left are student names, and it's sorted alphabetically by student names here. And you can change that. And you are looking at the total score and then the level description. And this is a local assessment. And the way that I know that is because this language of adequate understanding, minimal understanding, that is not language that we usually use for SBAC or New Hampshire SAS or NEWA or STAR. So this particular piece of assessment must be sort of maybe a local math assessment. Okay. Here is the total score again. This time, instead of sorting it alphabetically, so I'm going to go back for a second. This was sorted alphabetically. And now what I've done is I have clicked this arrow. And when you click that, it sorts it from highest to lowest in terms of performance score. And if you click it again, it'll go to lowest to highest. Okay, so you can sort both of those ways. This is just showing you that now it's at lowest to highest. And I want to show you that we're back sorted by student name. This is a single assessment. Okay, it's the 4th grade everyday math assessment from a particular school district, right? It was a local assessment. They put in the end of unit or end of year math assessment. And you can see here that these are the different sections of that math assessment listed individually, right? So we have operations and algebraic thinking, numbers and operations base 10, numbers, operations, boom, 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 boom. Okay. And you can look at those and you can sort. I could press on any of those arrows and sort by. Now we've gone ahead and sorted by section over here by numbers and operations in base 10. So now this report shows multiple assessments over time. And what this report is showing is our students are on the left. And I'm going to call this top student Joe Schmo. Okay, so let's pretend this is Joe Schmo. And Joe Schmo, his total score out of 76 was 64. So good job, Joe. His total for 2nd grade. This is the end of year for each grade. In 3rd grade, wait, sorry, go back. In 3rd grade, not so good, right? It was 29 and out of a total of 59 points. And then in 4th grade, he was back up again. He got 63 out of 71. So maybe he is, maybe had a bad day. Who knows? But so this is showing you that you can basically take, you could do this with Fontes and Pinnell. You can do that with any test that you give each year. All right. We're going to look at a funky report now. It's called level movement. And it's It's funky. So let's go there. You can look at multiple assessments and see how a student has grown. And it's a stronger visual report for this. And again, it's the same data as you just saw. So it was 3 end of the year assessments. And this is aggregate. So I'm going to do my best to explain this, what looks like chaos, but it's not. It's actually pretty cool. If you look on the left, this is aggregate. In other words, it's not individual students. This is the whole class. And let's say we're looking at 4th graders and we're going back to look at their historical, just like we just did, their historical performance. On the left-hand side, this particular, cohort, 4th grade cohort, we can see their scores in 2nd grade. And for the everyday math, end of the year. And for that particular assessment, there were 6 kids in level 1, 6 kids in level 2, 12 kids in level 3 proficient, and 15 kids above. I'm going to go to the next column. The next column shows their performance in 3rd grade. We had 21 kids that were quite below, 9 kids that were below, 7 kids that were at level, 5 kids above. And then if we take them now to 4th grade, this is sort of a depressing graph. We have 16 kids below, 5 kids, substantially below, 5 kids below, and 11 kids were proficient. So for this particular graph, and this will be in reporting, advanced reporting, you're going to need to put on a cohort filter to make sure that you keep all of the kids that took the test over the 3 years so that you can get a true cohort for growth. I'm going to talk about these arrows now. What this is showing us is the movement of kids. Okay, and if you click on here, it'll tell you basically the amount of students. This shows you the amount of students that moved from one category to the next. Okay, so we had a substantial number of students who moved from yellow to red, right? We had, and again, if you have to keep this live, if it's live, you can actually see the number of students that have moved. We have here the number of students that moved from above proficient down to below proficient. We have the students here who moved from above proficient down to proficient. Okay, so you're understanding what those arrows mean, and when you're live, you can actually see the numbers, and there's an accompanying chart that can also clarify the movement for you. So it's called level movement.
Is that chart able to be printed so that you could say these are the kids that we're seeing the movement on?
Yes, the chart will give you the kids if you drill down into it. Yes.
Great.
The next sort of the NA2 scatter plot also measures movement. Okay, it'll compare the differences between 2 particular assessments. And it can also help you to see if a student is performing the same way and if those 2 assessments are aligned. So remember I was talking before about like NWEA it was STAR, didn't predict what that student that we were looking at earlier, what that student would do on the SBAC, because his or her scores on the STAR were much higher than his stars on the SBAC. So you can do that comparison here with any 2 scatter plots. So let's look here. So you can see in this report that every one of those dots is a student, first of all. When you hover on those dots, the student's scores or their score will come up, the student and the scores on both of the assessments. On the vertical axis, so going up and down over here, we have the math grade 4 SAS assessment from 2019. On the horizontal axis, we have grade 3. So we can see here if there's a correlation between, for this group of students, we can see the correlation between their performance between their 3rd grade math SAS and their 4th grade math SAS. And for most of the students, there was a correlation, because you can see that there's generally this straight line here that would indicate a correlation. So I'm going to go to a particular student. I'm going to go over here. Let's see. Well, so this student all the way at the top in the upper right corner was above average on both of the assessments, right? Was above proficient. If you go to this student, Heather, you can see my cursor, right?
Yes.
Okay, so if you go to this student over here, you can see that this particular student on the horizontal axis, right, was higher, but on the vertical axis, they're sort of in the yellow, right? So the student scored not as well in their 4th grade. Make sense? So if you go right through here, it's the scores that are aligned with this diagonal line where the greatest correlation is. So like this student was proficient on both assessments. This student proficient on both assessments.
They were actually level 2.
Oh, sorry, level 2. Thanks, Heather. These students were level 1 on both assessments. Okay. A student like this was level 1 on their 3rd grade, but level 2 in their 4th grade. So that's how you read those. Now, you can also color code these. It's a really cool report. You can ask to turn all students with IEPs a certain color. You can ask to, any of the student group variables, you can sort of change them. You can do boys, you can do girls, so you can really look at the performance along different demographics. So here is a comparison of the SAS for the math and the SAS for the ELA. Okay, so we have the 2 different content area focus. And you're going to notice here that there's the performance on the ELA is generally stronger, and that goes across all of New Hampshire. Performance is stronger on the New Hampshire SAS in ELA than it is in math. But it's the same thing, right? All of these kids over here scored at a level 4 for both. These kids scored at a level 3 for both, level 2 for both, and the average, this burst is the average score was level 2, okay? And then these are the level 1s for both. And then where you see, these particular students over here, they were level 4 for ELA, but level 3 for math. Okay, if you go up over here, these particular students were level 1 for ELA, but level 3 for math. Okay, so that's how you can look at that. So comparative report, I talked about this earlier. We use the reports that we push to you from this that tell you about how your students did for SAS those reports are comparative reports by achievement level. So they're just really easy to look at. And I'll show you a couple now. So here we have the different achievement levels. And this is the ELA score is up top. And this is the SAS for 4th grade. And you can see that that is divided into 4 sections. All the way to the left, we have the above proficient, proficient, below proficient, and substantially below proficient. And underneath there, we have the different, I keep wanting to say claims, but that's SBAC, the clusters. So we have reading literary text and we have reading informational text. And there's only 3 levels in this report here because there are fewer items than in the overall score, right? So it's a more reliable score if we put it into 3 buckets as opposed to 4 buckets, because in 4 buckets, there may not be enough items to make it reliable, to make reliable conclusions. So this is a 3 bucket. The reading, literary, and the informational text, which are pieces of the overall score, are in 3 buckets here. And again, you can see that, let's see, for literary text, informational text, there are literary text, we have about 73% were below proficient, and in informational text, about 70%. So that's interesting. Usually it's the opposite. Usually informational text is the weaker of the two. So you notice how I added the 2 below proficient to sort of come to some conclusions with the report. What were you going to say, Heather?
That's what we've been seeing when we looked at a lot of the interim data for this year. We've been seeing a shift that the reading informational text has been getting higher scores than reading the regular literature.
As a literacy specialist, I'm kind of happy about that. That was what we just went over, by the way. Okie dokie. Now, we're going to spend a little time on assessment builder reports, and then we'll wrap up. Timing is perfect. We're going to look at the item analysis by question, and this is a fun one. It helps you determine which questions students had the most or the least success on. And here we go. So we have this particular item here. Oh, this is looking like science. And clearly, most students chose answer C. 34 students chose answer C. 4 chose B, 1 chose A, 4 chose D, and 1 left it out. You can see in the back left, in the bottom left corner, there's a check next to the C because that was the correct answer. So we're happy that 77% of the kids answered it correctly. Do you see where it says in that same chart to the left, it says frequency? So it says there that 77% got that correct, and we're happy about that. If I were to be live right now and I clicked on here, I would be able to, where it says click here to view, I would be able to view the item there, which is lovely. This was a multiple choice question. It was developed. It's worth 1 point. Here's the question. This speaks to something called content library, which I can tell you about at another workshop. But that content library holds items that you are free to use to create assessments and worksheets, et cetera, et cetera. You search for items by standard, and you can go in there and play by yourself because it's pretty easy. So the icon for that is the 3 books, and it's basically an item bank. So let's look at this one. This gets a little more complicated. We are still talking about science, I guess. And if you look here, letter B was the correct answer. And yes, 527 kids opted for letter B. However, in case you didn't notice, 434 chose level A. So this is where item analysis comes in really handy, right? Because as a teacher, I really want to understand what the misunderstanding was there. And that's why I love item analysis, because then you can do an analysis of the misunderstandings. You know, why did they choose A? Why did 135 people choose C? How do I need to change my instruction to address those misunderstandings? And that allows us to do this. You can see here also, this is listed by DOK, DOK2. So the items, many of the items in Performance Plus have depth of knowledge attached to them or rigor levels attached to them. Oh, and this is the other thing you're going to want to see, the blanks, right? It's a really good thing to be able to look and say, well, why did they leave it blank? Why are kids not even attempting? Here's another one. This is also science, and we can see here again.
Karen, your screen is split. We see your email and like it's making the other thing a little tiny.
Really?
Never mind. Yeah, no, that is you. Yeah. Your
If I
Oh, never
represent
mind.
how it,
That's me. That's me. Sorry. You're good.
oh,
I was like, wait a minute. Sorry about that.
um, so, this is an interesting one because there seems to be a really broad distribution of error. So that would be something that you want to address because it wasn't one common misunderstanding. There seems to be some different misunderstandings there. So this is a different, this looks different than, I'm just going to go back for a second. These are for multiple choice questions. So you see the pink and the blue, and there's only those two colors, and there's A, B, C, and D, right? Those are for multiple choice questions. This particular visual is for open-ended questions that might be addressed, it might be worth however many points. It's open-ended. This one's worth 4 points, right? So if you look on the left here for interpretation, then you can see percent of points available, right? And that's the left side, both of the graph and of the chart. So 0%, 13 kids got 0% of the points available. 12 kids got 25% of the available points, which means basically out of 4, 12 kids got a 1. 7 kids got a 2 out of 4, or 50% of the points available. 11 kids got 3 out of the 4 points available, and then 1 kid got all the points available. So that's what this means. And I guess 75% was okay. 3 out of 4 was an okay score on this particular question. But don't be put off if you do an item analysis and you see those different colors. It just means it's an open-ended question. So the other report, an assessment builder that you could certainly use, that I would encourage you to use, and again, unfortunately, most of the assessments that we push in, like the national assessments, the state assessment, you can't get items. But again, if you have a final that you put in here, or you have an end of unit assessment that you put in here, you can very easily create it in a way that you can do item analysis. And we would encourage you to do that. So this is cool when you do an item analysis by student. It's more like a spreadsheet, and I'll show you here. You can get your students down the left-hand side, all right? And then you have your overall score, and then you have each of the items. So you can see the items up at the top. Right now, this item analysis is sorted by student name. So I can go back and I can see, let's pretend Joe Schmo is back here at the top of the list, right? And we can see he got 1 point for 1 point for the second one, for 3, 1B. He didn't get points, 0, 0, 0, 0, got 1 point for 7, right? We understand that. These are his total points. He got 56 total points out of 71 possible points. That's all well and good, but we can sort this in a way that makes it more useful. And the way I've sorted it here is I've pressed that arrow, and now I'm seeing it by the highest to the lowest points possible. So my highest achieving student got 65 out of the 71 points, right? And I can then see, okay, as I go down, where, at 52 points down there, you're not proficient any longer, and so on and so forth. But what also happens is as I go down, I can see more and more and more errors, and it'll allow me to see more and more about what the students did on that assessment and how to sort them for reteaching.
The other question, so everything that you see across the top for those questions, when they built the framework, they put that information in there, correct?
Correct. Yes.
So as you're building your frameworks, you want to make sure that you're putting in sort of that information that's going to be helpful for you when you run the report, right?
Right. But if you're on this webinar, you're not up to building the frameworks yet. But what I do want you to know is that there's different ways to create frameworks. Sometimes we put the item itself in, and other times we just, when I think what Anne has done here is she just put in keywords for each item so that you would know at the top here which item it was. So there's another way to sort this as well. And I just really have to give Anne some credit here because this is her favorite report, Anne Mordecai, our colleague. Sorted by student name, but by question, by correct answer frequency, right? So what this does is it shows you that on the top here, item number 38, 100% of students got that correct. Item number 58, 94% of students got that correct. If we keep going, right, down to the right-hand side, you're going to wind up seeing the items that less than 75% of kids, 50% of kids, and that's going to tell you about your reteaching, right? Because once you're in the realm of, well, you know, half my class or a little over half my class did not get this item right, there's clearly a major misunderstanding, and you're no longer talking about giving a student some extra help. That actually needs to be retaught in the core instructional environment. So this is a really useful assessment and a really useful way to sort it. And this is similar, okay? She's changed it so that the lower percent is at the top, so we can see more quickly the items that most kids had an issue with. Okay, questions?
I don't see any questions in here right now for folks at this point.
Okay. I'm happy to answer any of your questions. You feel free to call me or email me or Anne or Heather. And we're happy to help you with anything you need help with in P+. And, you know, happy to also get on and do 15 minutes of troubleshooting with you. I've done that before this year. Anne's done it. Heather's perfectly happy to do it as well. So, and I wanted to let you know that here are some upcoming workshops. So on February 17th, we're going to cover uploading student data. On March 1st, remember that ILP, the individual plan that you can just pay a little extra for and create those individual plans for your students. That's coming up on March 1st. We'll have another reporting webinar, and I'll talk to you about filtering and fancy stuff on March 22nd, and creating a local assessment April 7th, which either Anne or Heather will be doing. So we hope that we will see you there. Our website, in the upper right corner of our website under workshops and webinars, you can see that over here. You can see the place for Performance Plus subscribers, and you can actually register right there for any of these workshops. And there's me and Heather and how to get in touch with us. So thanks.
Great. Thank you, everybody, for coming. I don't see any more questions. If for some reason you have a question, make sure to type it in, or you can raise your hand and I can give you the ability to be able to talk. But a lot of the reports, it's great to see what they look like. And then you need to get into Performance Plus, I found, and start taking a look at those filters and how to run the reports to get what you want. So make sure you come to that other webinar that's going to give you a lot of the information on filtering.
Yeah, but maybe try some before, like kind of do some self-teaching. And we have some resources also on the Performance Plus member page that you can also log into. If you create a login in our into our resources, then there's some resources for you. And if you have a problem accessing, just give either Heather or I an email and we'll help you get there. Okay.
All right, I think that's it. I think we're good.
Thanks all. Be well. Thanks, Heather.
Mm-hmm.
See ya.
Bye-bye.